I'm Lori Ann LaRocco, and joining me now is Andrew Petrisin. He is advisor for multimodal freight for the Department of Transportation. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lori Ann. It's good to be here.
So let's get right to it. You are essentially employee number one, if you will, when it comes to FLOW, which is the Department of Transportation's Freight Logistics Optimization Works, which is a private-public partnership amongst industry professionals as well as government officials to help streamline the supply chain and the flow of trade. So let's get right to it. And if you can, take us back to the days of COVID, because literally this is a brainchild of yourself where you literally saw the supply chain just kind of get cemented, if you will, from the pandemic impact, if you will, of the consumers buying and the supply chain not being able to keep up.
Yeah, so I'll take us back to fall of 2021, right? So the U.S. Department of Transportation, Secretary Buttigieg, and the Biden-Harris administration are having 3 times weekly calls with the Port of LA, Long Beach, ocean carriers, the terminal operators, really trying to really understand and forecast future congestion, future performance of the supply chain to understand when the volume of ships will essentially be throughput through the system and the cargo will be throughput through the system. What we were doing at that time was what I saw kind of a very manual form of data sharing, right? We were getting on these calls 3 times a week, really sharing kind of PowerPoint slides, talking through what we were seeing from each perspective. And to your point, Lori Ann, we really thought about at the department, how could we really extend and build upon this public-private partnership in a way that maybe is a bit more kind of tech forward and kind of more permanent, and really kind of flow, blossomed from there. I'll say we have a really great team here at the department that it might have been, employee one, as you said, but we have a really phenomenal team that has helped to build this, since that time to kind of build it into, what it is today.
And it really has expanded. From what I've learned, you have about 70 participants. Is that correct?
We've got 70 participants and about 60 more kind of in the onboarding process. So at some point, kind of either from kind of first contact of folks who are interested to kind of nearly at the data sharing stage. And I think we'd like to say we have I'd say a really good foundational base for participation as well. So we're thinking about kind of total volumes that we're capturing within FLOW. It's at some of our major U.S. ports, over 70, near 80% of cargo volumes as they're booked, which is really exciting for us at DOT. And I think really exciting for the FLOW participants as they look to use some of the data we're providing.
So let's explain the platform. And so, my readers and our viewers kind of know where I come from, where trade is a series of pipes, right? So when you're looking at the supply chain, you have all these different pipes, be it the ports, the warehousing, the distribution centers, the trucks, the railroads. Talk about how this platform aggregates all the participants' data so you have that true line of sight, right? The more you know about where your container is or your product, the better off you are able to make those decisions.
Yes. So we broadly think about this as, understanding supply and demand, right? You're talking about, pipes, really the capacity, right, to move cargo. And then do we understand, future cargo volumes and how that's changing in real time, at a really kind of large scale. So broadly speaking, what we're doing is, aggregating purchase orders from our, shipper and importer partners, as well as booking information from our ocean carrier partners. Right, doing that on a daily basis, and then providing that back out to the broader membership base of FLOW to understand aggregate future demand. Right, so we're talking 40 days out for booking information, 60 days out, say, for purchase orders, and looking to push that out further. So you're getting what is not a DOT model of what future demand is, but actual demand, right? Actual bookings that have been made, actual purchase orders that have been cut. And we're then in turn providing that back out to the FLOW members. And the other side, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Keep on going.
I was saying the other side is the supply side of the capacity side, right? So we understand demand as it's changing. Do we also understand essentially the capacity of the system to throughput that cargo, and what is a highly interdependent system right, as we all know. So terminal utilization, right, chassis availability, again, providing essentially aggregate statistics and information to the industry to complement their existing data and analysis, to do better forecasting and do better service planning.
And when it comes to the forecasting, this is where the inflationary costs can come in. So if you don't have that line of sight, if you don't have that real-time data where if you see a possible a congestion at a port that you can avert, talk about that in terms of the actionability. I mean, there's a reason why the data sharing does work.
So that's a great question. We have a number of use cases that we're working on very closely with Flow members, really implementing some of the data that we're now sharing on the platform, and happy to talk through a few of them. Primarily around forecasting, right? So we're working with an ocean carrier partner, essentially to use the purchase order data, right, that's shared through Flow to better estimate, future bookings inland, right? So where they might receive bookings in the future to help them better do their service planning. Working with an IEP or chassis providers to essentially to correlate, right, the flow demand signals to their chassis utilization, so that they can kind of better preview, right, chassis utilization, say at the West Coast, right, as we see potential cargo shift due to the events in the Red Sea. Right? Can we get ahead of this, right? And I think that's the big picture here is, can we look around corners, right, collectively, right, and kind of be proactive. We have warehouse partners who similarly are looking at the flow data to better preview vacancies and rates and things like that, as well as shippers who are using the booking data and the terminal data to better preview congestion to communicate, right, with their partners. Which is really exciting, right? Is using it as kind of a, it really is a shared view, right, amongst the industry, what we expect to happen, and being able to use that as a collaboration tool.
There are so many uncertainties right now within the logistical supply chain. You've got the Panama Canal with the drought restrictions, which is kind of slowing down trade a little bit down south. But more importantly, you have the Red Sea crisis, and you have the Houthis and the attacks, and now the possible attacks of them trying to expand down further towards the Cape of Good Hope. How has Flow been able to help the participants in terms of navigating these uncertainties?
So one of the things we heard, we have meetings in DC regularly, and we had one last fall, kind of around really kind of a technical session, right, to really start to dive into some of the data. And one of the things we heard from the Flow participants was an interest in the department producing some kind of exploratory trends and analysis, right, to see kind of where a cargo shift might be happening. So that's something we're beginning to do now, right, as folks are asking questions about the impacts of, the Red Sea on cargo shift to the West Coast, we as a department, now that we have this really strong kind of public-private collaboration, are able to share, information on cargo trends, say into, LA and Long Beach, in a way that, as we think about where we started this conversation 2 years ago, right, we didn't really have that capability, right? So it really is. I think we've pushed and kind of broken a lot of new ground here at DOT in terms of kind of how we engage with the freight industry and supply chain industry for a shared benefit.
When you're looking at the different trade routes, when you're looking at the Red Sea, we do have U.S. retailers that bring in items from India. And the India trade route is one of those routes that has been impacted by the Red Sea. Any type of real world analysis or anything that you can provide there in terms of how the real time looking at the flow and how long it's taking for the product to get there, where the retailers have been able to circumvent and maybe mitigate those delays by, positioning elsewhere?
Yeah, so I'd say, to that point, we actually, what we're really excited about, and we just started to release last week, was data inland, right? So not only, we had to that point essentially been sharing volume, say broken down by reefer dry, rail truck, 2040, into say the Port of Los Angeles, or Port of Savannah. Now we're sharing essentially data going into the port, and then what's the end warehouse destination, what's the rail hub, But to your point, also, what is the country of origin, right? So we're now able to share through the platform and to our participants, essentially, a much more comprehensive set of information. So as you're thinking about, the impacts of, India trade lane, you can actually start to see in the data, what cargo is coming from India, and kind of what ports it's going to, and ultimately where it's ending up inland in the U.S. as well. And that's an exciting development for us.
Closer to home, country of origin, which is now our largest trading partner, is Mexico. Just recently I was interviewing, the president of Union Pacific, and they are very bullish on Mexico. As you know, they are a member of FLOW, and they're the only U.S. railroad, right, that goes across the two boundaries. You've got DHL, another FLOW member, expanding, their footprint in Mexico. The same thing with Maersk, the same thing with ITS Logistics. All of these are FLOW members. How exciting is it to see where you have these members establishing a footprint in a trading partner like Mexico? What kind of data are you seeing? How does this actually help impact the GDP of the United States? Because the more line of sight you have, the better you are, of course, in terms of ginning up your own economy.
Yeah, so I'd say, first of all, our members have really, I talk about this being a collaborative effort, have really kind of worked with us to lead the way in terms of the types of data they'd like to see, right? The types of data that they'd find useful in this kind of partnership. So we're excited to continue to kind of explore what that might be, outside the United States. Right now, we're focused, primarily on, U.S. domestic marine terminals, right, and the data kind of flowing through those ports. That's not to say that, working with our members, we couldn't expand that, right, to kind of other locations, throughout North America. But right now, we're primarily focused on, U.S.-based ports. Again, in conversations with members, that scope could expand. And the last point you hit on is really important as well, is understanding the economic implications of this, right? I tend to tell folks, freight is kind of, physical manifestation of economic activity, right? So you're understanding, and we have new data to help understand, the U.S. economy, and that's something we're excited to continue to look into here at DOT. We're still kind of in an earlier stage, I think, of that part of what we might be able to do. But that's an exciting potential future development.
We all learned the hard way about the pandemic with inflation. And our viewers know, of course, there's always a tail when it comes to inflation. For the logistics, the transitory tail is about 3 months, right? So you see what's going on now, 3 months from now, you normally see something as it relates to inflation on the store shelves. This is something the Federal Reserve has no control of. The chairman, of course, has mentioned that countless times, during the pandemic. The data that FLOW provides now, does the Federal Reserve have access to it? Will they have access to it? And it could be beneficial, if you will, in terms of their own economic outlook, so to speak, of what we're going to be facing in the future.
Yeah, so I'd say right now, we hold the data very tightly per the data privacy laws that kind of, we collect the data under. This is primarily what we call, data trust within DOT. So the aggregate statistics are available to the members. The folks who have access to the microdata, which is collected by the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, that is a very, very, very small group of people who, can use that information to then develop the aggregate statistics. We, have received continued interest, obviously, from a research standpoint, an economic research standpoint. I think we are still kind of working through, the proper processes and kind of, what, research usage might look like for this information. That obviously has to come, in communication with our members, right? And with the industry partners, it's their data. So, that's something I think we continue to look to explore. But right now, it's this information seen by a very kind of tightly held group of individuals.
Logistics is a long game. A lot of people were very short-term oriented in the markets, but when it comes to the investment of logistics, if you see ocean carriers investing in ports, if you see trucking companies invest in inland ports or warehousing, distribution centers, this is a bullish indicator, right, of where they see potential growth. What has you excited in terms of when you're looking at all of these data points? The long-term growth, the projections, what kind of trends are you seeing that have you excited about 2024 and beyond?
So, I get really excited about flow, and in part because it's really exciting to look at really novel and build really novel products around freight data. When I think about flow, another big part of it too is really kind of what is, I think, a novel public-private partnership, right? And you're seeing companies, right, really work with DOT in a way that I think, is very new in some ways for us and other ways for them. And I think about, you talked about kind of long-term investment, right? And in my eyes, this is a long-term investment. This is an infrastructure play, right? This is digital infrastructure, right? So it's maybe a little bit different there. But this is a long-term commitment from our partners, right, to do what we are doing with Flow and here at DOT more broadly as it pertains to kind of freight and supply chain. I've heard from a number of them on many occasions, we're in this for the long term, right? So I think from our perspective, as I sit here from the Flow program, right, I think that complements the types of investments you're seeing, you're talking about on the kind of physical infrastructure side, whether it's at ports or terminals. We're trying to also kind of marshal on the digital side, right? And we're seeing, I think, really great take up from our industry partners who are saying, this isn't a, kind of 1 month or 2 month endeavor, right? This is something we need to do for the betterment of the industry and the betterment of the country.
And this is something that's not being done in other parts of the world. What kind of feedback are you hearing from other governments as it relates to their own logistical needs? And are we now a good example as to the pros of data sharing, right? And the pros of trust?
So the response has been, I think, really great from other governments. I mean, have kind of approached us and thinking about, how do we have a flow for here, right? Which is exciting, which is really exciting for us. I think for the U.S. to kind of be leading in this space as it pertains to, public-private data sharing around supply chain. We continue to kind of engage with them and talk to them and tell them kind of how we've done it here at DOT. I think folks have really picked up on the kind of independent steward role and the kind of data privacy, importance of the data privacy laws we have here. And we'll continue to work with other governments who are interested in kind of replicating or joining what we're trying to do.
Andrew Petrisin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lori Ann. It's a pleasure to be here.